4 boats, $1 billion in cargo, and less than 30 minutes before they hit American waters. That's how it began, not with an explosion, but with a radar pulse inside a Navy command center near San Diego. At 5:30 a.m., the screens lit up with 4 fast-moving signatures, running dark, slicing through the Pacific like blades of glass. They weren't fishermen. They were part of La Sombra fleet, the maritime arm of a $15 billion cartel empire that had abandoned the deserts for the deep. When the border walls rose, they built a navy of their own. What followed wasn't a battle, it was a test of patience, precision, and resolve. So before we dive in, imagine this. You're on that command deck. The radar just flared red. Do you watch or do you act? Drop your answer below, because this isn't just a story. It's a test of nerve, strategy, and the thin line between order and chaos. At precisely 5:30 a.m., the calm surface of the Pacific was shattered by a pulse of light inside a Navy command center near San Diego. On the radar screens, 4 small signatures appeared fast, low, and running dark. Their speed, nearly 70 knots. Their heading, straight for American waters. These were no fishing vessels. Intelligence analysts already knew the name behind the movement: La Sombra Fleet, the maritime arm of a $15 billion cartel network stretching from Baja California to the Caribbean. Over the past 3 months alone, their operations had pushed 480 tons of narcotics and human cargo across the ocean, generating more than $2.4 billion in revenue. Every shipment that slipped through funded weapons, bribes, and mercenaries. The cartel had once relied on desert convoys and hidden tunnels, but as the southern border tightened, the battlefield shifted. They abandoned the sand for the sea. Now, they moved through international waters with near-military discipline convoys launched at night, guided by encrypted GPS routes and refueled mid-voyage by support boats disguised as trawlers. Their goal this morning was simple: break the blockade, test the response time of U.S. patrols, and prove that the ocean could still be their highway. Inside the command room, tension thickened. The senior watch officer leaned forward. Confirm classification. 4 high-speed craft, no transponder, no reply to hails. The call went out to Coast Guard and Customs air units. Intercept coordinates were locked. Through the glass, the dawn horizon glowed faint orange, deceptive calm hiding incoming motion. Somewhere beyond that thin blue line, 4 boats carried more than contraband. They carried the confidence of a billion-dollar empire and the challenge of a nation daring them to cross. The radar tone held steady, cold and sharp, counting down to confrontation. By 6:10 a.m., the Pacific sun had just begun to burn through the horizon haze when the call went out. Intercept authorization confirmed. Target group: La Sombra Fleet. Across 3 coastal sectors, the U.S. Navy, Coast Guard, and Customs Air Patrol snapped into motion. From Naval Base Coronado, 2 MH-60R Seahawks lifted off, blades slicing the humid morning air. Farther south, 7 MQ-9B Sea Guardian drones began their silent ascent, sensors locking onto the 4 fast-moving blips cutting across the sea. Within minutes, the coast transformed into a living defense grid: radar, sonar, and human intuition linked into one pulse. This was not a random patrol. It was part of Operation Blue Spear, a federal initiative launched after smugglers began using high-speed boats armed with signal jammers and decoy cargo. Since January 2025, the Navy had logged over 410 maritime confrontations, disabling 377 vessels without a single casualty. Each success saved an estimated $50 million worth of narcotics from reaching U.S. shores, but also sent a message: speed no longer guaranteed escape. Inside the command center, tactical officers tracked every pixel. Algorithms predicted the intercept point: 6 nautical miles off Point Loma. ETA 6 a.m. The orders were clear: disable, not destroy. Non-lethal precision rounds, radio escalation protocols, and AI-guided fire control systems would handle the rest. Still, every veteran in that room knew that technology could only go so far. The cartel had adapted faster than anyone expected, and these vessels were rumored to carry light armor, plating, and reinforced engines built in Colombia. If they broke through this line, they could vanish into civilian shipping lanes within minutes. Maintain pursuit corridor. No gaps, no surprises. On screen, the 4 red blips multiplied as decoy drones launched from the cartel boats, a new trick. The room fell silent. A different kind of battle was unfolding, not just of weapons, but of adaptation. And here's the question for you watching this. If every smuggler learns to think like a soldier, how does a nation defend without becoming an army itself? Because what happened next, at 6:42 a.m., would test the limits of that balance. At 6:42 a.m., the still morning turned electric. 4 cartel vessels, each a 38-foot carbon fiber interceptor, burst across the waves, engines screaming at over 70 knots. The wakes behind them sliced white scars across the Pacific surface. On radar, they looked like lightning bolts carving through water. From 12,000 feet above, Sea Guardian drones trailed silently, their infrared lenses cutting through mist and glare. Each frame streamed in real time to the Navy's Pacific Fusion Center, where analysts watched the chase unfold across a mosaic of screens. Artificial intelligence plotted intercept vectors, updating every 3 seconds. The margin for error, less than 20 meters. The cartel flotilla carried more than contraband, it carried defiance. Intelligence had confirmed their holds contained over $72 million in mixed narcotics and synthetic compounds. Each boat also carried 5 crew members, trained to scatter and dump cargo if cornered. For the cartel, loss of a shipment was acceptable. Capture was not. At 6:46 a.m., a Coast Guard Sentinel-class cutter surged ahead, its engines roaring at full thrust. Contact visual, range closing 4 nautical miles. Seconds later, 2 MH-60R Seahawks descended, flying just 200 feet above the sea. Their gunners prepped precision disabling rounds, titanium core projectiles designed to shatter engines, not lives. The cartel boats split formation, 2 turned sharply east, hugging Mexican waters. The remaining pair veered north toward the U.S. coastline, hoping speed could mask intent. They were wrong. The first burst of warning fire crackled across the waves, echoing off the hulls like thunder. One of the fleeing craft swerved violently too sharply. Its starboard engine caught flame, smoke spilling into the wind. Within seconds, its power dropped by half, and it began to drift. The others pressed on, riding chaos like a weapon. But the Navy's sensors tracked every move, every change in velocity, every pulse of intrastated heat. By 6:55 a.m., 3 helicopters and 2 interceptors had encircled the last targets. The ocean had turned into a chessboard, and every piece was already moving toward checkmate. By 7:15 a.m., the chase had reached its breaking point. The 4 cartel interceptors were now reduced to 2 twin streaks of carbon black cutting through the rising glare of the Pacific. Every second, their engines devoured 120 gallons of fuel, trying to outrun the Navy's shadow above. From 8,000 feet, the Seahawks adjusted position, hovering low enough to rattle the water's surface. The command came through crystal clear. Engage precision fire. Disable only. The gunners steadied their aim. Each round carried a micro-stabilizer and a guided core that could pierce an engine block at over 900 meters without shrapnel spread. When the first burst fired, it looked almost silent, just a pulse of metal and light. A heartbeat later, the lead cartel boat lost thrust. Smoke burst from its stern, followed by a sputter of flames. It slowed abruptly, bow tipping forward, its wake collapsing into chaos. The second boat tried to zigzag through the interference line, hoping to confuse radar tracking. It failed. A single well-placed shot struck its left engine mount. The propellers seized mid-spin, and the vessel slid sideways, dead in the water. Targets neutralized. 0 casualties. Crews detained. Below, Coast Guard interceptors closed in, their blue strobes flashing over the drifting boats. Within minutes, 14 cartel operatives were in custody. They carried encrypted radios, $9.6 million in bundled currency, and modified GPS systems linking back to a logistics node near Ensenada. At the command center, the operations chief exhaled. 3 minutes, 4 vessels neutralized, 0 bloodshed, he said quietly. That's the difference between force and control. For decades, cartel power had thrived on chaos and speed, but this morning, both had failed. Technology, discipline, and coordination had turned the open ocean into a controlled battle space, a place where precision replaced fear. Yet even in victory, analysts knew, the empire behind these boats was far from broken. Somewhere along the Mexican coast, another convoy was already fueling up, and as the sun climbed higher, the Pacific prepared for its next confrontation. By 9:40 a.m., the Pacific had gone quiet again, but silence never meant safety. In a briefing room at the Naval Intelligence Center, officers reviewed the operation's aftermath. On the main screen, Aerial footage showed the two captured vessels being towed toward San Diego. Their decks were littered with jettisoned crates, 72 sealed containers holding synthetic narcotics, gold-plated weapons components, and encrypted drives. Estimated street value, $214 million. It was more than just a bust. It was a blow to a $15 billion criminal economy that stretched across oceans and continents. Analysts traced the shipments to an offshore logistics hub disguised as a seafood company, laundering nearly $800 million annually through shell corporations in Panama, Belize, and Spain. Yet the damage went both ways. Maintaining constant maritime patrols required staggering costs. Each Arleigh Burt-class destroyer burned through nearly $2.3 million per week in operations. Every drone sortie cost $55,000 per flight hour. Fuel, maintenance, and personnel stretched defense budgets to the limit. The Navy's success was undeniable, but so was the price of persistence. In Washington, debate flared. Some lawmakers pushed to designate major cartels as transnational armed entities, granting broader military authority to intercept and strike at their offshore assets. Others warned of diplomatic fallout. Mexico had already lodged protests after Navy units pursued vessels too close to its waters. Meanwhile, cartel communications intercepted that same morning painted a different picture. Their encrypted channels referred to the U.S. blockade as the Steel Curtain. A senior operative was heard saying, "We lose boats, not business." Within hours of the seizure, intelligence noted preparations for 9 new vessels under construction along the Baja coast, faster, longer range, and with carbon-silenced hulls. Victory, it seemed, was temporary. Every ship seized forced the cartel to evolve. Every success for the Navy demanded even greater vigilance, and somewhere beyond the horizon, a new kind of confrontation was already taking shape, one that no radar could easily see. By 11:20 a.m., the captured vessels were secured at Naval Station San Diego, their cargo cataloged and sealed under federal supervision. On paper, it was another success. But to the commanders watching satellite feeds from the border, victory felt temporary, fragile even, because the sea was shifting again. Just 200 miles south, new signals were already appearing on radar. Intelligence drones patrolling the Gulf of California picked up 10 high-speed contacts, leaving a secluded cove near Punta Eugenia. Each vessel was longer, faster, and almost invisible to conventional sensors. Their hulls were layered with carbon composite skin that absorbed radar and infrared reflection. Analysts called them ghost runners. The U.S. response was immediate. Under Operation Sentinel-Net 2, a network of 124 coastal radar towers and 37 autonomous drones linked into a real-time surveillance web stretching from San Diego to Brownsville, Texas. Within seconds, new detection algorithms identified micro-disturbances on the ocean's surface, ripples no wider than a fingerprint revealing the incoming convoy. Still, the challenge was relentless. Every advance in U.S. technology was mirrored by a countermeasure. Cartel engineers were experimenting with signal-jamming buoys, decoy heat pods, and subsurface cargo capsules that detached and sank before interception. The cat-and-mouse game had evolved into a digital duel across thousands of square miles. Despite the pressure, the Navy held its line. Since January, 468 smuggling attempts had been stopped at sea. No injuries, no civilian damage, zero loss of life. Every operation demonstrated that precision could be powerful without being brutal. But officers knew the truth. Deterrence required endurance. Destroyers needed overhaul. Drone pilots rotated through burnout. And on the other side of the horizon, the cartel's funding remained vast, fed by billions in offshore trade. As dusk began to fall, the Pacific shimmered with quiet menace. The ocean looked peaceful, but every mile hid a signal, a route, a shadow. The war at sea had no front lines, no declared battles, only vigilance. And in that silence, both sides prepared for the next move. The Pacific was calm again, but calm never meant peace. In less than one day, a $15 billion empire had been forced to retreat, not by overwhelming fire, but by precision, discipline, and patience. Every engine disabled, every route mapped, every move anticipated. Yet for every victory, another challenge waited beyond the horizon. Because the ocean never sleeps, and neither do those who profit from its shadows. For the U.S. Navy, this wasn't just about intercepting smugglers. It was about defending the thin, invisible line between order and chaos. So here's the question that lingers after the radar falls silent. If crime can evolve into warfare, should defense evolve too? Tell me what you think below. And don't forget to subscribe because this story isn't ending here. The next wave is already forming.